branding, but I wish more of you guys had brandings on deck. I really do.
Yeah, we could have a library of branding that people
Yeah,
can pull from. I'm pretty sure you have that library, don't you?
I am the library. It's on the Discord in the VNA logo section.
There you go. So, do I have? I guess I have permission so long as I help people feel virtually not alone. Right? That's nice.
If they'll take it away, you know.
So, I could download one right now. We can multitask. Did you?
Mm.
What do you think about what I saw you? Luke showed some of the things you said in his in the stream he did yesterday. You were I saw you pointing at different kinds of Christianity. It got highlighted by Luke.
I'll
Did you
have to
want to point
find
at
it.
anything?
I'll have to find. I didn't tune in until PBK was on there.
I saw you
Hey,
say I saw you say something about emissary versus master.
yeah, I think it was probably in tying it to Sam Harris, and his emissary is his master. Like a lot of people get locked in their left brain is like that's me, the conscious thoughts, the one that, and that's all
Hmm.
they see of themselves is. It's
Oh
like
yeah,
I don't
I,
know.
I've started thinking that the emissary is the Antichrist, and it's also called the mind. And we happened to name it, and they called it Gavin. When I was born, it's also called ego, but then it's in all of us, and we tend to name it, and we want to make we teach you that it's precious and important, and
Well, it's the
it's
part of us that
sacred.
has to make the decisions that steer our lives, and so as far as we can tell,
Could it be put in service to the master or the heart or some thing that you hold at the top of your value hierarchy?
if you've constructed one that's willing to be put into service.
Man, it's such a hard move. Like I know that move of being antichrist and then saying, "All right, I'm going to submit." Like I don't know how many times you've done it, but that move of submission is very hard to do. Like it's actually, I was telling my wife, it's like it's simultaneously easy and hard. Like you can do it, you can just do it in the snap of a finger, but man, there's a lot of resistance.
It can be done in the snap of the finger, but it doesn't mean you can do it. It's like I think like with quitting smoking or quitting something you're addicted to, it's like
Mm-hmm.
part of you can want to and be like, all right, I'm gonna do it, but unless the decision, which is like size is cutting things, unless like you cut off the part that doesn't want to, like you're just wrestling with yourself.
Mm. I did the I did cigarettes and some, what was it? I liked the vape pen there for a while.
The
Uh,
what?
Vape, like a
Oh,
THC vape.
yeah, propylene glycol is approved by the FDA, which is a great institution, but it's approved for consumption, not putting it in your lungs.
Well, I stopped it, and the reason I bring it up is because I started to feel the addictions, and my nails started getting brittle, and I was like, I'm gonna stop it now, and I stopped it.
No, there
And
was part of yourself that loved yourself enough not to destroy your physical body.
I also had a wife that's like, you shouldn't do this, and I trained myself to submit to my wife. You know, like sometimes she'll say, "Come walk with me," and I was wondering if she just texted me to say, "Come walk with me," but um, and there's a part who's like, "No, I don't want to," and she's like, "Come on, it's good for you. I like being with you. I don't want to," and then I finally go and do it, and then I feel good, and it happens a lot. So this practice of submitting to my wife and then feeling good about it later probably prepared me to try and submit to a higher power. To practice doing that.
I always got the thing. It's like, what if the higher power isn't at all interested in you? Like, sure, it's out there, but
That's one of the faith of the mustard seed, man. It's a You got to counterbalance that with a what if yeah. There's a counterbalance to that one. I guess that's your dream catcher where things are in tension. But if it gets out of tension and you just go off with that, and you don't have any faith to counterbalance it, or
It's like
Yeah,
how
same.
embarrassing it would be. Is like you're, I submit to you, Lord. He's like, it's, it's like when I don't know. It's just the whole notion is what makes you think I want you to submit. I didn't make you one of the chosen people.
But
Wasn't that your first clue?
I like the idea that the heart beating and the lungs breathing is, I don't do it, and there's a force doing it for me, and it's like that's nice. And he's doing it for the people that I don't like. So this whole loving your enemy thing, and I think Jesus talked about the light shines on everyone, right? You know, the sun shines on everyone. So if you're still breathing, to me, it's a good sign the Creator loves you,
Yeah, I like
right?
it. Yeah, it's like, do you believe in God? Doesn't matter. Does God believe in me? Because
I like the idea that the lightning can strike you down, um, because I'm still here.
and He
Right?
hasn't
He
yet.
hasn't struck me down yet.
It's clearly
But
God believes in me, or I wouldn't exist.
well, yeah, and I'm being careful about it too because there's a part of me that's like, it could happen. I could get struck down, right? So I'm tippy toeing a little bit, you know.
I don't know, man. Most of this life for me has been like a life sentence. So that would be like, all right, it's over. Whatever's next has come.
Man,
So,
that
I don't know.
you've had good moments though, right? You've had moments where it's like you had your laugh gasm, you know. You
Yeah, I did. I did.
what a gift.
I saw that I was reading that's there's a type of seizure that does that too, where you can't stop laughing or you can't stop crying. Oh, I don't know. It could have been that, but
Sometimes sometimes these things reveal things like I like these experiences. Like I start losing vision in my eye, and then I'm like I start having empathy for people who can't see. I'm like, what's it like to be blind?
I
One
can't have
time, my wife
empathy
had to
until I
do
experience the whatever myself.
my wife got trained to be a teacher, and they asked her to do some type of exercise, and what she chose to do is like blind herself. So we got these big glasses and taped them up, and then we went out for dinner. And it was so strange for like for her and for me because even the people they thought I was like this very nice person dating this beautiful blind lady, and they didn't want me to tip them or anything. Like they thought I was like this amazing human. Um, and for my wife, it was such a strange experience to go blind. You know, to feel what it's like to be blind, to go out to eat and have to trust people and not get to experience the ambiance of the environment. So there's little things we can do where we get to have some empathy for people.
It's like
Let's,
let's put a helmet on and go see if people go see how people treat us if we seem like because that'd be the part I would think would be scary for women as I understand them is like go out looking like a disabled person and feel all that attention.
That makes sense to me. I think when I think about where my wife might be neurotic, it resembles that what you're talking about. Like, oh, I feel like there's always lobsters coming out of my face and people are looking at them or something. you
It's
know.
like that bit I pulled from PVK the other day where the women are more sensitive to all sorts of threat and therefore they understand the social layer way better than men do and the implications of like social faux pas to and I don't know it's a layer I don't really grok very well but I know it's there and effective.
I was leaving the movie theater with my wife and children yesterday, and I had that thought. I was like, what would it be like if I wasn't here? You know, with them walking through the parking lot, you know, like I felt a sense of responsibility, you know, to be a protector, you know, and I felt what it might be like for my wife to um, have some type of trust that I would protect her. And so she does trust me with a lot of that kind of stuff. If things break, I fix it. If there's a threat, I'll deal with it. Um, but yeah, being on the other side, it's interesting being on that side of it, being the protector, you know, and then it's trying to see through the eyes of like my wife, who wants someone to be able to fix things and protect is also challenging. It's challenging for me, at least, to have empathy.
What movie programming did you subject your family to?
Oh, it was called Migration, The Ducks. It was about a father. It starts off as a father duck in the pond who's like, "We've got a pond. Why do you want to go anywhere? It's like, it's safe. It's nice, you know." But then once they get to go on their adventure, he realized that if he stayed that way, he would be alone one day, and so he's like, "All right, we'll go on an adventure for fear of being alone." And then it turns out that he actually has this thing called courage. He has an ability to there's lessons and things learned by different people, different characters, different ducks. It was okay.
Did you have something you were going to say, Chad?
I don't remember.
Good.
I'm sorry, Chad.
The thing I like about courage is like you can only do it when you're scared. That's the only time you can have courage, really.
Sometimes people have called me courageous when I didn't feel scared and I didn't feel courageous. They were just, and if
They would have been scared. They were projecting.
Well, I was
So much
being
is projection,
naive.
man.
Maybe I was being naive or faithful or having belief, and they're like, "You're so courageous." It's like, maybe not. Actually, I know what it was. I was scared that if I had continued doing the thing I was doing, that I would look back at my life and say, "Oh, man, why did I do that?" So I was scared of a future me. I was looking out for a future me, you know.
That's kind of one thing I'm thinking about is you were talking about the understanding and the women. Gosh, I'm trying to gather my thoughts. I thought a lot about boundaries and what it means to be a man, and what it means for me to be a man, and how I like the adventure of learning how to be better at being the man that I would hope to be, and the importance of all that stuff. And a lot of this has to do with uh, understanding, like you were saying, Gavin, about like, oh, what if I wasn't here to walk my kids and my wife out of the movie theater? Like, what would that be like? And I think that's where uh, I'm trying to rush and say all this at the same time, but the idea of boundaries, not barriers, but men and their boundaries, the ones that they have, that they adopt so that they can operate in a world that they are that we actually feel useful and rightly ordered in the world, and all that stuff is very important. And I'm not sure if we talk enough about it or well about it. I don't think Peterson even talks
You're
about it
talking
very well.
quietly about it. I can barely hear you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Men's boundaries and what you said?
I don't know.
Oh
I must
no.
have a
The
I must have a
boundaries.
You're really far away from your mic, Chad. It's not your fault. You're quiet.
It's like if you don't have any boundaries, I know if I didn't have any boundaries, there would be no trust. I like to remind my wife and children occasionally. It's like there are men who have left their wife and children, right? Like that's a good bar for them to realize. It's like I haven't left yet. I'm here. You know what I mean? Like, but it's if I don't say that, like I like to, like we have this really nice life, and it's like I want to remind them. It's like there's people right now that have a different life.
wait a minute.
They
Just
have
wait
a
a minute,
different
though.
dad. They have a different country. They have a different government. Like I like them to be able to contrast what they have with what they could have.
Yeah, but you're talking about boundaries in a different way than I am. Does that make sound better?
Is it? Well, when I think boundaries, I think of you can only have the boundaries you're willing and capable of enforcing. You can think you have boundaries and then get walked over and realize, oh, I guess that wasn't a boundary. Or
Is this thing working?
I hear you,
yeah,
Chad.
just try and project a little more.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm in a home, so I'm trying not to bother these people. Um, so the idea about okay, so this is how I'm understanding the boundaries is like adopt boundaries that I adhere to, so that I don't I don't cause more damage in the world around me. Now, what I hear you guys describing are more like barriers that you put up so that other people don't infringe upon your space. And so I feel like a boundary is like
A
kind of like
bound of your own behavior.
yes, right. So like in a football game, you have like a whole football field, and to be in bounds is the arena that you play the game. If you step out of bounds, then you can't play the game successfully, and you have timeout. So like when I'm in this, so when I adopted this idea of boundaries, it's something that I adhere to, so that I can actually properly show up in the world to the best of my ability. And
Yeah.
so like what this is why like before I um started dating Anne, like I didn't know what dating was. I just thought like dating was this thing where you met somebody online and you went and hooked up and maybe you went to dinner or something, but it wasn't like a real date. It was just like, hey, we're showing up and see what happens. Like that's not a date. So like I did that enough and was in enough bad so-called relationships where I like worked myself into like an existential crisis where it was devastating. And then after that happened, I was like, I can never do this again. Like I need to actually know if I actually like somebody before I'm willing to go any further in a, let's say, relationship. So I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm not going to kiss you. I'm not going to, no physical contact. I'm going to come out right up front and say, I'm really interested in you, but I want to know if there's more here before we actually, before I even hold your hand, right? So I'm putting out the flag saying, these are my boundaries that I'm going to uphold to. I'd appreciate it. Yeah. You know, you kind of help me stick to my boundaries. Because before I was only meeting women that I was operating on the under the boundaries that they were willing to let me penetrate.
Yeah, you're playing the game where like, all right, I'm gonna try and do as much as I can and see where your boundaries are.
Right, right. And if your boundaries don't match my ideals, then I'm just gonna leave. Which that's a terrible way
Afterward,
to live. Right,
after
right,
I've gone past your boundaries that don't match my ideals because you let me go too
right,
far, I'm gonna cast
right,
you aside for letting me go too far.
right.
That's a
Because I'm an
terrible way to
idiot.
be. It is a
Right,
mode of operation.
right. So then that's what I mean by boundaries. And so this idea about the boundaries that you adopt so that you can operate in the world is it maybe they're called principles, maybe it's something like that, but they're really between me and um, I think my higher power, and this is how I'm able to actually be in the world and feel part of the world, not apart from the world. Because I'm the one who's always setting myself apart from, generally speaking. So,
A covenant.
okay, that's all I have to say. I fucking love you guys. Okay,
Love you
I
too,
gotta
Chad.
go.
I love you,
Hey
brother.
Good.
guys,
You're
I got a
disturbing
good
people.
video. I got a good video later. You should guys check out.
I love
You
you,
usually do.
Gavin. Campfire.
All
And
right,
I saw
Gavin, you're on your
some
own again. I'll be back in like 20 seconds.
cool. Oh, full screen. Full screen on the Grim Grizz channel. I love the guy. You should click like. You should click subscribe. You should consider becoming a member. He has this thing called Virtually Not Alone. It's pretty good because there are people who are very alone. Yeah, there's even stories of old people who never get checked on who end up dying in their home. So this whole Virtually Not Alone thing is way better than being the alone. So no brandings, Tom. I'm streaming to the Randos United, and so I don't have access. I would have to download them, and I should. I'll put it on my list to add some branding into my brand on a different StreamYard. Yeah, I'll do that. I might have some bias and pick the ones I like the best. But yeah, that's in the. Gringros has a Broken Clock Tower Discord server, and he has a section in there. He told me earlier. VNA logos, perhaps, where if you are successful in helping people feel virtually not alone, you can make use of these things. So also, it looks like, oh, Grimgris is a genius. So let's see. reality might be absurd.
You can hide us for this part.
So I'm a big Kierkegaard guy.
Okay.
And Fear and Trembling, for me, was another life-changing book. I probably read it like 2 or 3 years ago for the first time. And I've really struggled to find a better word than absurd. But I think that like the thing that's always missed is that, you know, and this is Kierkegaard's point, that Abraham believed by nature of the absurd. And so it's absurd that God would ask, you know, it's absurd that God would ask for your son, not just for him, but for you to kill him, for you to draw the knife. That's absurd.
Like he's asking for a bad thing.
Right. It's absurd for God to make a garden perfect and then put this most appealing of trees and say, do not eat it.
There,
nice.
That was a long one. Raquel has
nice.
moved on to making shorts because she wants an actually successful channel. And that's what the YouTube wants you to do. And they're all vertical for all the phone people.
But is it actually successful? What is a successful channel?
Well, yeah, it's how do you define your terms of success?
Exactly.
Like,
what's your aim?
Not standard YouTube success is my aim. There's too many boundaries or barriers to come up, I guess.
I was talking to my wife about, she had a dream and about Chad was in the dream. She's just like, why did I have a dream where we went to Chad's house? And she said that I wanted to stay because he was going to have someone popular, and I was going to be on the show. And I was like, I wonder who it was. Was it John Vervaeke, Chad? I mentioned these names: John Vervaeke, Paul Vanderklay, and Jonathan Pajot. And then I tried to explain, like, you know, I bring everything back to Peace on Earth, and I realized like they are all trying and having some success at helping people find peace, I think. But I had made the claim, it's like, I think Paul Vanderklay is actually doing it better, which is interesting because his subscriber count is lower. But I don't know. That was just me throwing out some claim, and maybe I'm biased because that's who I pay more attention to. But yeah, it depends on what you're aiming at. Like, are you aiming for a big subscriber count? Do you want more of that dollar? Do you want to serve mammon? You know, what are you doing? And I'd made the claim like, no, here's what it was. Who can scale it? Helping people find peace, who can scale it the best? And I'd said, I think Paul Vanderklay is better at scaling it. That's what I said. So
finding peace, man. Peace on Earth is a thing, because like, if give me the right biological weaponry, I can give you a peaceful Earth. You know, I mean, like an Earth full of people with peace in their hearts and peace on Earth are two different things.
Yeah, it depends on what you mean. That was what was interesting. Like, I think peace on Earth meant for me, I simplified it to, let's make sure everyone has access to clean water, right? I was thinking life is better when you have clean water. But then, you know, recently I've encountered an experience of peace within me that is like a different, it's a different meaning behind the word peace, right?
So describe the physiological experience of it for me as best you can. I know you're always saying you can taste it in your videos.
So your heart rate is not elevated. Like the stress that with heart rates and like armpit sweat and feet sweat, like when you get stressed out, there's a kind of a sweating and heart rate and body temperature thing physiologically that can happen. So for me, it's the heart rate tends to be lower, and the sweat production is less. Even like for periods of time, like I wouldn't even stink anymore. Like it was weird. And in the face of the things which would cause me to lose my cool or whatever you want to call it, lose my peace, I'm better able to go into those encounters with you know, kindness, gentleness, patience, self-control, these kinds of things. And you actually get to experience that. And you actually might even come into it with joy. Like the thing that's funny, I was looking I was going through all these old videos and photos with my children recently.
Say
And
photos again.
Photos. I did it fast. Photos. PHODOS. Photos.
I just like the way you say it. Go ahead.
Photos.
Sorry.
Anyways, I came across a video, and I might even put on my channel, just me with it. It's just years ago. My son was probably 2, and I had a baby in my hand, and I'm sitting there trying to talk about the Holy Spirit, and my son's over there like he's like messing with the camera, and I'm talking about how I had found the Holy Spirit, and my wife's watching it. It's like, you're so frustrated. And so like my understanding of the Holy Spirit then was like this mind-blowing experience of, oh, you probably don't want to like kill and torture and assassinate people. The Holy Spirit doesn't do that. Like, because I was playing with the maneuvers on how you do peace on earth, and I was like, yeah, Holy Spirit's not going to do these. These are off limits. And so I was like, oh, this makes sense. And at the time, talking about the Holy Spirit, that's what I was referencing, and I wasn't understanding like the actual bringing the peace and the patience and the joy into the moment where my child's like interrupting me, because I was like
being the embodiment of the peace and the joy. Yeah.
There's that we talk. I'll circle around. The thing called Gavin, which looks like the Antichrist, is getting frustrated, But whenever I'm able to make that Antichrist small and the Christ big, all of a sudden it's like I should have had the joy of having this healthy baby on my lap that's beautiful, and my son's sitting there exploring and learning and wants to play with me, but it wasn't there. But you can see it in the video. It's like I was frustrated, and I was doing my practice. I was like, take a breath, relax, maintain control, just like the Pharisee, do the right things, It's a difference between just acting like you're filled with the Holy Spirit and actually being filled with the Holy Spirit. There's a difference, and you can see the difference. Like you can, once you're on the other side of the glass, you can see it. It's like, oh.
It appears Chad wants us to talk about depends.
Where did he say that? Can you guys explore the idea of it depends on what you mean, and how all of reality hinges on depends on?
Well,
where does that take you, sir?
To adult diapers, naturally.
Oh man!
Like, are you gonna make it through this encounter, Grandpa? Depends.
I recently bought a device that helps with that, so that everyone in the house can get woken up whenever someone had a dependency.
It's a dependence.
What's interesting is like being in the tech space, dependencies is really important. You can have a system in which there's a single point of failure where everything depends on it, or you can have an architecture where you avoid the single points of failure.
Right, the cornerstone. Like depends on, Chad, is like it depends on what you mean by whole health. It depends on what you mean by peace on earth. It's because words and phrases are only pointers to things. And it might be that you're pointing to something. And if you're pointing to the thing I think you're pointing to, then I can agree. But if you're pointing to something else, then I could not. It would.
So really interesting. In order to know whether the other person is using a word and pointing at something that you are blind to, you have to practice a kind of agape, or listening, and a kind of humility to say, oh man, maybe I have a blindness, and maybe they can see something that's in my blind spot. It's like, so then that's important.
That's interesting to me, because that's really where I think free will comes into play. It's, I mean, I get it from crazy channeling material that everybody would frown on, or a lot of people would frown on. But it's like say it's your elephant or your master and not your emissary that has the free will. And if you're pointing at something that part of me isn't ready to see, or is choosing not to see at this time, then my emissary isn't going to see it, because my master, it doesn't align with the master's free will.
Yeah.
And that will protect me from perceiving what you actually mean, because on some level I'm unaware of, I'm choosing I'm not ready for that part of my life.
What's interesting is I got children, and a child will make a mistake, and I can be like talking from what I think is like the top of a mountain about the answer, and it just whoosh, it does nothing. It's no good at all. It's like there's paths to an answer, and they're at a certain place with blind spots, and you might actually be able to point out what some next steps. And do they trust you? This goes back to what Chad was pointing out is like, whenever I set up boundaries, like, oh, I'm only going to have one woman, and I prove it, if I set up boundaries where it's like, I'm not going to leave my family, and I do it, like, you set up boundaries like that, you start to earn trust, so that, and that's just big examples, but you can do that moment to moment. Then they might be more likely to say, I don't know why you want me to take this next step, but I'm going to trust you. So it's hard. It's like, why would anyone? I guess it takes the faith of a mustard seed. It's like, does this person know a next step that would be good for me? And maybe by
or am I willing
to
get the next step from that person?
What's interesting is being a coach for my kids, trying to teach them how to kick a soccer ball. Like, I was able to like do this where the goal is that I want them to have this powerful kick. I was actually really good at kicking, like really good. And like, I could have went to college kicking a football. They would have paid my tuition. But so I'm trying to teach these little kids, and they're just not getting it. And so then I break it down. I'm like, okay, let's just stand still, and let's just bend your knee, and let's just do that. And so I'm doing piece by piece. And then eventually they're kicking the ball. Within a day, they're kicking the ball. They hadn't been able to do it for a year because I wasn't being a good dad coach, right?
Coach.
I'm just going up there and say, watch me. Bam, But then once I teach them how to do the kicking, now it's like, well, maybe daddy can show me and coach me how to do things, right?
Once you've established your, reliability as a source of that information, right?
Once I become a better dad and a better coach, and they see that, man, this dad guy actually helps me transform, maybe they pay more attention to me.
Maybe.
Instead of me just being some Antichrist Gavin who's the king who can kick better than everyone and wants to tell everybody, and show everybody, then I could actually go in and say, oh, look, here's your next step. It's going to help you get to where, if you want to get to this, you're going to have to do this first, right?
Do you want to drop the link again to see if anybody else wants to make mouth noises?
That's up to you, man.
I suggested it because I want you to.
There you go. When people hop on the stream, you never know what you're going to get. I wonder, some people seem to have like lost their attention. It's like, it felt like we had some people who wanted to threaten the existence of a channel.
Right?
People could hop in and say things. People could hop in and say things that would cause you to get flagged, right?
Yes, that's possible.
That's the risk.
Terribly dangerous.
I mean, it's possible.
We have courage, so that's all right. I've found that people don't like to get on my stream very often. There's like a handful of people that are willing to, but when I drop the link, it just stays empty for like a lot. I was hoping that with you here as like a mediator, people would feel more safe to come on and be seen and heard.
Well, I feel like if you had just been streaming and had dropped a link, I might not have done it, but you just kind of boiled the frog slowly. So you could, I think when you hop into a channel with a lot of viewers, like I mentioned it to Luke, this idea of that which comes from your mouth can defile. Like to me, there's a responsibility and a power. Is like, am I causing people to move away from God or come closer to God? And this is a megaphone that we're playing with.
It's true. I mean,
but we can have fun, right? It's good to play. It's good to have fun. And we have to be able to practice having mercy show,
And it just helps me to be able to forgive myself when I mess up terribly like that.
Yeah.
It's like, but
Yeah,
like that's why I think the estuary thing is such a good idea, is because people have those kind of questions, and like they don't want to, like, especially when I was younger and exploring that stuff. It's like, these guys look faithful and happy, and I'm terribly unhappy, and I don't want to come in with my questions and threaten their faith. So
I can do that. I'm very good at doing that.
speaking of which, how's the church experience going for you?
Oh, so I've graduated from standing with a large group of people with my eyes closed and doing the didgeridoo to the music, to being able to open my eyes and read the lyrics and sing along, in the worship. And then I've graduated from being someone who wants to like talk about all the mistakes that people are making, on the ride home with my wife, to realizing this kind of concept of sometimes you want to put the cookies on the bottom shelf, and like you want to make sure, like the thing is, like, so the idea of Jesus is he wants to go out after the lost sheep, most lost sheep, and give them the most precious thing, right? Which means, and you don't have to know how to do algebra in order to be saved. You don't need to know how to do calculus in order to be saved. And so a lot of times in the corner, you end up with smart people who they know about them cookies on the top shelf, and they might even take some pride about, going up there and getting the best cookies off top shelf. But sometimes you got to present it in a way and put the cookies on the bottom shelf so that it's good for people. It's just like this, to go back to the teaching my son how to kick,
Like, do you want to present yourself? Do you want people to have the cookies, or do you want to present yourself as, hey, look at how good at getting cookies I am?
Like before I started like doing a regular chat with Chad, it was I was waking. The reason it came about is because I was waking up at 4 a.m. to write a book criticizing the 12 rules for life, right? And it didn't even occur. But here's what happened. It was the same thing. The 12 rules for life was putting the cookies on the bottom shelf. And if you want to go look at them cookies on the top shelf, go get Maps of Meaning, right? It's like, just because Jordan Peterson can put cookies on the bottom shelf doesn't mean he's a bottom shelf guy, that where he doesn't understand things on a higher shelves, right? Sometimes he's speaking to people, meeting them where they're at, to try to help them, which is loving,
And sometimes you can write books that are called the 12 Rules for Life. Meanwhile, you're a metropolitan of a church of not following stupid rules. Sometimes. Neil made it.
Hey,
There's Neil.
Hey, Grim. Do you prefer, if I abbreviate your name, Grim, do you prefer to go by Grizz or Grim?
I have no preference.
I'm just
glad you're not calling me by my birth name.
No.
Or
I'm going to pretend I'm playing branding. Neil, Gavin, talk for a second.
Hey, Gavin. So I wanted to meet you, face to face, virtually, not alone. But it's nice to meet you, and I really appreciated your story. There was a segment, I think it was about 20 minutes, on Grail Country, where you really kind of shared. It was beautiful. It was like the first time I'd heard you talk about your testimony, but it was about a 15-20 minute segment, and I was like, man, that's powerful, and I'm really happy for this guy. So
that's good to hear.
Yeah, it feels silly to say like congratulations for like conversion, but like I do feel that way, right? It's like, congratulations, welcome to the kingdom. Hey, Luke.
Hey.
Good morning.
Morning. Neil, you're so
All
swell.
the stars we have on now, guys.
Luke, if I ever troll you, you can throw it right back at me. So I apologize for.
I don't think. Were you trolling me? Where were you trolling me?
I said like you were about 10 minutes late on your live stream, and I had a comment like it was the libidinal lack of timeliness or something like that. But
yeah, no, I mean I get that. That kind of, it's like Gavin, you said earlier, you're the feeling of not being loved or something like that. Like that's exactly it. Because I've mentioned that to people a lot. There are certain people, and part of it's temperament. I try to zoom out enough to get outside of all these simple boundaries and categories that lead you to make false judgments, I think. But there's something about, like, I can sense it. It's not necessarily agreement. Like, I can be talking to somebody and we're disagreeing about everything, and I feel loved the whole time. And there's people sometimes where this is kind of my contrarian, where I feel we're agreeing about everything, and I'm like, this is not, I don't like this. Everything about this feels wrong. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. I got to throw a wrench into this thing, or else I'm going to lose my mind.
That's what happens when I start feeling love. I'm like, wait a minute, this is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So Neil, I wanted to say I loved your story, and I'm curious, like the story that's going to come out in the game you're making. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping I'm encouraging you to continue.
I'm definitely not stopping that because, well, I don't really want to talk about. There's that self-serving thing, right? No, well, there's that, but there's, Jung would say that anything that you do, you have a dark side and a light side of anything you do. So it's like if I get on a live stream and I talk about a personal project of mine, it's like, oh, like the dark side of that is tingling. It's like, oh, I'm just, look at this, it's no, we're not. But no, I was talking to Chad about, and we're going to talk, we actually have a conversation later today. And I was talking about, so he was talking about the boundaries, right? The frame. And so Peterson would say, in order to play a game, you have to have the frame. And there's a scene in Hook where you got Robin Williams as Peter Pan, and the kids throw him the ball and say, play. Throw him the ball and say, play. And Peter Pan's like, well, he's not Peter Pan yet. He doesn't know how to play. So you have to have the frame first for the creativity in the space, you could say. Like the frame sets the boundaries for the creativity. You can't have creative action without it. So like the way I'm thinking of a game, or making a game, is you have to be the frame and the creator. And creating the frame is just as creative an act as the interior. And it's actually harder. It's harder because and it's a recursive process in that you create a frame, you try playing the frame, it doesn't work. It's stupid. It doesn't. So then you have to adjust the frame, and then you play it again, and then you adjust the frame. And that only works insofar as you're able to take yourself out of that frame and say my game is stupid. I'm gonna try to fix it.
For those of you who don't know, who are seeing this, because I'm sharing also to my stream, Neil did a talk over on the Friday Morning Nameless. Apparently, has his own channel where he hit through his own learning of Unreal 5 and making a game that's theoretically very helpful for those also trying to walk that path.
Well, as I see it, the process of adulthood is, so I went to Disney World once. I think my daughter was about 3 or 4, and we were standing in line to get a photo with someone with characters. And there was this woman in front of us, and this woman had, she was in a wheelchair, like one of those motorized wheelchairs that they have at Disney World. But she was only about maybe 35 or 40. She was, but the problem was she couldn't walk around on her own. She was too large. She needed the wheelchair. And she had on her wheelchair, she had these bracelets from Disney World. And they were connected in a chain, like a bracelet to a bracelet to a bracelet to a bracelet, because each of these bracelets were from one pass that she had to Disney World. And she had this giant chain, and all the adults around were like, wow, this is so impressive. Look how many times since it, and it was her pilgrimage. And I looked at this and I was like, this is what happens if you're still a child at 40. This is what happens. When I saw that, I was like, wow, that just and people were praising her for it. I'm sitting back. And
they were at Disneyland at the time.
Yeah, but this is our culture in a nutshell. And okay, so what I realized is that as children, we experience other people's imaginations, which is appropriate. And we are meant to do that because we need to grow and learn and play. And then it's how do you maintain the play instinct? How do you maintain the joy and as an adult? And that is, you need to begin creating on your own. And when you start out, and it's just as true for me, when you start out, everything you create is going to be crap. It's just going to be awful. but it's that recursive algorithm again. You go and you go and you go and you go, and eventually maybe you get good. And I would say, to the extent that you enjoy it, that you love it, you're probably on the path to getting good at it, because it's rare that that instinct of like loving something is not tied with at least your capacity to get good at something. It's rare. Maybe that's maybe I'm wrong about that, but yeah. Anyway.
There's a few things to be careful about with that, based on, like, I've been a creative. Like, I was like 6 years old and invented a car that flew with telescoping wings. Like, I've always been a creative. And what can happen, I had one time I was in a partnership, and they're like, I created this thing, supposed to make money. It was just all me. And they said, this is before I had children. And the guy said, oh, this is your baby. So, like, you have to be careful. The things you create can become your baby. There can be an addiction to it, a kind of idolatry. Be careful with it. It's really powerful. You can get into flow states and create all kinds of things, but be careful.
Yeah, you're spot on. So what I would say is, or what I've learned through the process, is that if I can appreciate the process of it more than the end result, so that's back to the recursive algorithm of it, right? If I can fundamentally say this is crap, like I'm going to break this frame and I'm going to restart, or I'm going to redo it, then I'm not in love with the creation. Then I can dispense with. Now, I'm not saying there isn't still some addiction. In college, there was one summer of my college year where I was playing World of Warcraft like 12 hours a day for 2 months straight, and that's all I did for like 3 months. And thank goodness, like, I actually got bored of it after those 3 months.
Flashbacks.
Yeah, I got bored of it after those 3 months, like right as school was starting, and it was good that I got bored of it. Yeah, this is not that. So I work on it. Well, right now I can't work on it. Actually, I'm at my parents' house over Merry Christmas and for 3 days. So, but it's things like that. Like, sometimes I find the most valuable time in creative endeavor is when I completely step away from the creative endeavor, and then I have the ideas regarding the creative endeavor. Like, I have to.
It's the House formula. Like,
yeah.
Dr. House could never really cure a patient if he didn't step away and talk to Wilson for 5 minutes.
I've asked my bosses in the past if I could get paid for taking showers and sleeping, because that's where I'll get insight.
Yep. No, but you're right. That's it. Like, I have these water notes in the shower. Like, I just write the water note when it comes.
Nice.
The whole "it's your baby" thing, like they always say for writers, like, if you're not willing to kill off your characters, then you have to be willing to kill your babies, or your work isn't going to be good.
Well, that's the conflating ourselves with God. Because if you think you can't kill your characters, then you're pretending to be God.
But one more thing on that note is, I got to where I could create, like, learning to operate at scale was, and on a team was huge for me, because like, I developed a skill to be able to do things my way. And then all of a sudden I go into a team and they call it, bad code, ugly code. Basically, they'd go read it and they say, I don't understand it. And I would say, yeah, I'm smart. You don't even understand what I'm doing, And what I realized eventually is I was doing magic. Like, if I'm doing this stuff that's amazing and nobody else understands what I'm doing, this is not going to scale well. Like, I have to be able to do it in a way, like, there's these words like idiomatic, an idiom. People learn idioms. I have to learn how to do it in a way which, when they look at it, they will understand it. And I actually have to go to and get people to help me. I say, how would you write this so that you would understand it? And I just know I'm not good at it, but then I've got this other skill set that makes me valuable that people don't even know about, really. But yeah, you got to be careful with the magic. Like, I know magic, I know how to do magic, but it doesn't scale well.
Well, when I started my channel, that I decided I would teach, because what I do in my actual job, which I actually haven't had much opportunity to do in the last 6 years, is teach. And I teach software, but nothing related to games or development. And so when I was learning it, so if you think of a typical apprentice style or structure, like if you're a cobbler, or actually a modern representation of this is, let's say you're a resident in surgery. And what happens is the attending surgeon does the most critical, difficult parts of the surgery, but you're assisting as the resident. But the rest of the surgery, you're able to do most of it yourself if you're relatively inexperienced, because it's simple and you could do the easy stuff. So it's that partnership. It's like that apprentice structure. And what I decided to do was like, when I was about 1.5 years out from learning this stuff, Unreal Engine 5 came out, and I was like, this is the perfect opportunity to create a basic class. Like, how would I teach it? Like, if you could teach something fairly well, you know it fairly well. But not only that, by being forced to put it in simple enough terms that other people with zero game experience can understand, by being forced to do that, it'll refine and update. Like, I would do a rough draft of what I was going to teach for an episode, and during the rough draft, I'd be like, oh man, I got to fundamentally redesign this because this makes zero sense. And then I would record the episode. But just in that process of teaching the basics, I got better. Like, I got way better. And then by the time the series was over, I was doing things that were at like my peak level of knowledge already. And I was like, I need to stop this series because I need to focus on, things I actually need to learn.
This helps you be a better husband and father, a better coach.
If you aim for excellence in any, well, at least in my experience, if you aim for that in any aspect of your life, it's going to percolate down to all other aspects. So, okay. So last thing on that, if you aim for excellence, the best way to do it is to combine your desire, or let's say your love, like what you love, with something that you can actually do that's good, let's say. Because if you can find that marriage, then you're going to be motivated to strive for the highest or strive for the best. And so when Chad is talking, I'm going to talk more about this with Chad today, but when Chad's talking about the boundaries or the frame, so that's like your daily practice. That's liturgy. That's the things you've got to do in your life to keep you sane. That's the anchoring. But then in addition to the things that keep you sane, it's like, it's not enough to just be sane. Like, you gotta aim for something. No, seriously. Like you
I haven't even got that far. That's why I left.
Well, the sanity comes for Grim. Sorry, GG Grim. I think you are on your journey. Like, I think I've been there. I think I've been metaphysically. I think I've been where you are now, and I'm telling you, it gets better. So it gets better.
Luke, are you back now? You keep popping in and out like you're
Luke, interrupt me.
Your phase shifting
I'm
over here.
Listen, talking to family. I'm doing my liturgies. I'm doing push-ups.
But you're here now,
Amen,
right?
brother.
Can you be present for a minute? Because not many people on my channel might be familiar with you, and there's some, especially this whole like, I know you as Luke's that piece of shit guy, that piece of shit theology fella, and I don't really know what it means other than you're that guy. So
you could have left me just the piece of shit guy.
POS theology and GPT Christian. Those are his phrases.
Well, all of my phrases. So related to that, actually, interestingly, I had a little bit of a epiphany awareness to what you guys are talking about, because I'm not a coder. I don't know any of this stuff. But like Neil, what you were saying, being creative, making your stuff relatable to other people. I'm known probably in the little corner for the people that know me as being like confusing and who's this Luke guy and what's he talking about, and I think I've always comforted myself or pacified myself, it's probably a better word, by saying, well, kind of like what you were talking about, Gavin, is, well, I'm just smart and people don't understand me. But I think part of that, Neil, what you were talking about, I think is very true, is there's some degree of not making your stuff relatable or your ideas relatable to other people is I don't know what it is, because it's as someone who's like prone to chaos, I don't like the order side as much. Like, even what you're talking about with stuff with Grimm, I think of, like, my fear is very much the Peugeotian hillbilly versus the Camaro. I love the Camaros. Give me all the Camaros. Fantastic. I have no problem with them. They don't make me uncomfortable. Hillbillies make me uncomfortable. Like, Rob Zombie horror movies are terrifying, because it's a bunch of the absolutizing hillbillies. Because I think that way. There's like this Sturgill Simpson lyric where he says, you know, he's talking about his turtles all the way down, and he's talking about DMT, and he says some say you might go crazy, but then again, it might make you go sane. So like that is the true part of psychedelics, I think, is that they can pull you out of this totalizing order, which is really its own kind of psychopathy. You know, and that's the space I like to live in because I'm comfortable there. But it,
sorry, I just want to say, like,
yeah,
they wouldn't have the clinical benefits that they seem to be having from purely a you know, physical health anyway,
yeah.
unless
So
they didn't do that or something like that.
yeah, it's kind of there's a comfort, I think, which is driven from a underlying fear of the unknown, of chaos. The cave you fear to enter holds the answers that you seek, all that kind of stuff. Chad's idea of like, you know, the hole in the forest is like the dark spot in the forest. Well, that's where the path is. There's no path anywhere else because light's taking everything else, and it's briars and thorns, and like you can maybe try to go that way where all the light is, where you can see stuff, but like it's gonna suck. Like you have to go into that hole that's scary because that's actually the path. But all that to say is like at some place in love, you have to make whatever your creativity is, like it just can't stay bound up in your own head because there's a path of further integration and growth in translating that. I don't know, I'm dubious of scale, but like letting other people understand what you're talking about.
There was this rando on PBK recently. This was just in the last few days, and he was making these drawings, and I looked at that and I was like, he's making
Gabriel,
Jungian,
yeah,
he's making Jungian mandalas. Like,
totally.
And I was like, you need to read Jung. Like, this guy needs to read Jung. Hey, Teo.
Yeah.
But he, like, what he was doing was exactly Jungian mandalas, and what Jung would do to his creative patients, what Jung would have his creative patients do, who are suffering, who are struggling, is they would make a mandala, they would come in, he would allow them to talk about it. Like mainly it's the Freudian thing where he's just allowing them to talk about it because they're understanding themselves through their art, because art is fundamentally a projection. But then he would have them say, like, after they looked at their art, after they've understood it, then he would say, okay, go and make another mandala. And instead of the mandala being this art that's just frozen in time, it becomes this 4-dimensional process where you're seeing yourself progress through time in your understanding of yourself, and through that process you come out of the dark forest, let's say. And yeah, so when I saw that guy making mandalas, I was like, that's exactly what he's doing. It's just very helpful for him to be able to see exactly what he's doing and understand himself in that way. And that, I think that is what I'm doing with game development, by the way. I think I'm making a mandala that progresses through time, because that's what the creative endeavor is, if it's visual.
All right, I need to hear more from Gavin, but first we have to say, hey, Teo. It's Teo, right? It's T today. I don't even know.
We can just say T.
Welcome aboard.
I jumped on a bit late, but really enjoyed the conversation. And then Neil mentioned something that I was like, wait, what? That doesn't sound right. But I don't know why it doesn't sound right. And then, but you've moved way past on from there. So I'm dragging us back a while back.
Bring it.
Go for it. Yeah.
You said, it was talking about characters and stories. And you said, if you're not willing to kill something you love with the character you love, then it shows that you're playing God, something like that. Can you flesh that out a little bit more?
Sure. So when Peterson talks about, if that most of you is deadwood and needs to die, so you got to think of it in terms of any writing, any story, any character you create is part of you. So like good storytellers can isolate out the different aspects of themselves. So they can take their trickster aspect and they have a trickster character, and they take the romantic aspect and they have a romantic characters going on, and all of that. And then a good storyteller also has the ability to see the parts of themselves that, let's say, are not so good, not so great. And if the story is going to have a happy ending, like if the good guys are going to win, let's say, the bad guys have to lose. So but the bad guys are still within you too as a storyteller. So if you're like, oh, I like that evil tendency of me too much, I like that, so I can't kill that character, because that evil character is the most fun in the entire story.
My
So how
favorite
am I going to
characters are the
kill?
bad guys.
I'm going to kill the fun? I can't do that. No.
I like Bane, the
Yeah.
Joker. Like, the bad guys are the best. They have the best stories. I understand
Yes.
that. You get some naive hero, and it's like, oh, you're an idiot. It's like the Bane character and the Joker character in the Batman series are like, it's like they have a reason why they are the way they are. I understand why they are the way they are.
I'll say two more things about that. So one is that it's terrifying to kill those characters, because you're like, I'm way more boring, and I'm just like, I'm a shadow of myself if I kill that character. So I'll give you an example. My favorite show 10 years ago was Californication, Hank Moody. I love Hank Moody, man. I love that show. Like, he is hilarious and terrible, and he's pure id, they would say. Like, it's just his worst trends just take him on a terrible journey of, hedonism. And anyway, so it's like I pride myself on being like quick-tongued and all that stuff, but it's, how do I state it? So you have to let some of that stuff go. But what happens is something new fills it, and presumably that thing is better. And if it's not, you're repeating the process. It's a recursive algorithm. So, but that's what I wanted to say, is that, much to my surprise, when I let those things go, new things that were better filled the void.
I just oddly got reminded that the Peter Pan story starts with his shadow escaping. I don't know if it's related at all, but there's that.
He had to catch his shadow, right? He came to catch his shadow, to reattach it and integrate it.
He needed Wendy to catch his shadow. He couldn't catch his shadow without. I don't know. There's something deep there, but let's not look at it.
So Jung would say, okay. So two things about you, really quick. Jung would say,
no more two things,
no more
Neil. You get one thing, pick it.
One thing. Jung would say, if we're not having success integrating ourselves from the top, the higher, the ideal side, maybe we should work on trying to integrate ourselves from the darker and the underbelly, and stop avoiding the underbelly.
Yeah, that's what happened to me recently, when I was like, the reason the people who uphold this Bible impact me so is because I don't feel loved. Like, the idea of holding the Bible up, like, are you holding it up above me? And like, are you holding all these dead authors up above me? Like, this doesn't feel good.
And why are you all focused on like the Old Testament and Paul, when the Gospels, where the Jesus guy at, is where the good stuff is?
Pretty good stuff. Like,
all right, Tyler, come on, give me something.
I'm so slow. So two things. First, I think the explanation Neil gave made me think, oh, I've got a problem with that. So what I had a problem with was the God part, that you're playing God part. If you're not willing to do that, then you're playing God. So that's the link. Help me if you can make that link for me. I don't understand how you can make that.
Once you start the creation process, when you're creating, you're already playing God.
Yes.
Like, we're in his image is the image of the creator. So you're already playing God. And I guess if you're not willing to kill off the bad parts, then you're not playing it right, maybe.
Yeah, that's I would, because also I agree with all of that as a storyteller, let's say, in whichever form that comes in, you are, you're basically putting your consciousness congress in as characters and letting them, play out the story. I don't know how consciously I'm very new to this writing thing. So for me, it's sometimes a little bit conscious, but mostly it's unconscious. And then it's after the fact, like, oh yeah, I recognize that part of that in me. So the relationship isn't linear, but there is I think the story demands it. It's the story that dictates who dies and who doesn't. And it's not much. I don't feel like even as a storyteller, you don't feel as much in charge. You know when it's this character needs to die, and it's as long as it's serving a purpose, either a conclusion or a rebirth, whichever way that if like death can be either of those. So I think the story demands more than a conscious effort to kill the monsters within yourself.
That's it in a nutshell. It's it's like you choosing versus the story. And so when you say the story, it's like what are you saying there? The story has agency. There is no agency. But I think what you're saying is that you are a medium. Like this is the way that I feel, and that our consciousness, we have to discern what is coming through us, let's say. But you're right. Like I have had certain times in a story where I knew I needed to do something in the story, and I didn't want to do it, and I was like, man, I don't want to do it, and I would postpone it. And in those cases, it's like you'd sleep on it, you'd hope it goes away, because maybe it'll just go away, and I don't have to do it in the story. And then it's like, no.
I want to tie this in with this thing that I've wrestled with. Like every time I try to write, or when I'm playing video games and leveling up my character, it's like I always feel this pull toward, like, why am I not just doing the story in life? Why am I not leveling up my character in life? So that's the thing that's my block. Like that's my block when I'm fall into the video games, or whenever I get into the writing, I'm like, why am I writing about the thing? I want to be in service to it instead of writing a story about someone who's in service to it, but that's where I struggle.
Hey, Chad, welcome back.
Hey there. So I think this is the.
I can't hear you at all now.
Chad.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Why can I hear you when you put an earpiece in your other ear? That doesn't make any sense.
Only one mic is active.
I had it in the wrong ear, probably. It resonates with your melon, I think. So this is why I kind of like have been trying to encourage people to write. And people will say, well, I can't write. I'm not a good writer. It's like, it has nothing to do with whether you should try and play with it or not. Like being good or not has nothing to do with being able to exercise the gift of being able to tell a story. Like, and like, it's hard to explain to somebody who hasn't written before how enriching it is to just play with the idea and like to drop into the creative flow and listen to what the storyteller is trying to tell you, who is the medium who's trying to jot down the story. It's very, very satisfying. And that's all I wanted to say.
No,
See you later.
That framing is really, really good, because you put the storyteller above and the writer as the medium. And I think that gives that's a much more, like, to my brain, that just fits better in terms of how things work when you're writing. You don't, it's not so much you're coming up with something, it's much more that you're receiving and translating something. And usually the work is in the translating from what you're receiving to what you're able to put out.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen King talks a lot about this. One of the best books I've ever listened to was a book called On Writing by Stephen King. And it had almost nothing to do with actually writing. It was more of like a love story to his wife, which is it's a beautiful book. But he does talk about a lot of this stuff, and he talks about having kind of strife when it came to writing, where one of these characters, the storyteller, would tell him this character has to go, and he'd be like, "Oh, I love this character," and it's like he's got to go, or she's got to go, or the dog's got to go, or whatever it is, and that's why people love his stories so much, because he's not really, you could tell when he's doing it poorly, right? His most recent book called Holly, he's not doing that. He is becoming the storyteller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've gone way past my normal ability to maintain the stream. As soon as Gavin gets back, I'll be closing this out. So, is there anything you want to say in conclusion?
Just that the act of writing or the act of creating art is typically good. in a therapeutic sense, because it forces that recursive algorithm, in that if you can see yourself in what you're writing. And I mentioned this when I was on Chad's channel, that when I was journaling and so much of it coming out was bilge, but it was necessary to get that out because I could see myself and I knew it was bilge, and I just kept going. It's the journey into greater and greater darkness, that it's the Dante's Inferno descent that then leads you back out to the light. If you keep going, you got to keep going. That's the key.
My only thing is, don't worry about quality. Just have fun with it. Find the quality in the participation. Love you guys. Bye.
See you, Jade.
Yeah, I will say really quickly, first, to quote McMull from the Hive Man, pray to play. And that's the best way to attune yourself as a medium to the storyteller, is by praying to play. Bye, guys.
Gavin.
I changed my subtitle here because I feel like I'm surrounded by genius, like, and I get to play the part. Like whenever Tayo said he's slow, I said me too. Like, it's cool being able to play the part of the slow person, because it helps. I think it helps bridge that gap. It all goes back to, like trying to teach my child to play soccer. I feel like you need to have that. You need to have people who can translate, who can slow things down for the audience. Like a lot of times, we have very smart people who are talking about things that I just don't understand. I heard one today. I was listening to that stream that Luke made, and he's talked about perennial, universal, absolute, instantiation in the person of Jesus Christ. And I'm just like, let me go to GPT. I need to, like, did he mean eternal? Like, did he mean eternal? Like, going in and out throughout all space and time? Like, is that what he just said? So yeah, I hope to be the slow guy sometimes here who can just say, what did you just say?
I say that, hey, look around, we're all here together, and at least there's that. And yes, Luke, live streaming and making videos, I don't know, it can be the new writing, but it's definitely a new medium that humans didn't have before, here on the precipice of unprecedented watch as I just disappear. All right, everybody, thank you. Thanks for making mouse noises, Gavin. You brought us all together just by doing this. Isn't that neat?
Sir. Yes.
Isn't that neat?
Virtually not alone. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.